Shana Tova, so happy. I'm so happy to see all of you. I know you're not supposed to be really happy on Yom Kippur, but it's really nice to look out and to see all of your beautiful Shana Punims. On this holy evening of Kol Nidre, we've stood in awe before the Torah scrolls in our ark. Our tradition teaches us that at this moment, on this night, in this service, when the cantor is chanting Kol Nidre, as she did so inspirationally tonight, that it is one of the times that our souls are the most vulnerable. Tonight, our contrite hearts can be refashioned and rebuilt by the power of our prayer and our actions. Tonight, we Jews stand humbly before God. You see, this day is a holy time, an opportunity to forgive others, to forgive your own self, to confess your errors and misdeeds and, yes, sins before God. It's the first step in the process of teshuvah, of turning, of repentance. It's the first step in sobriety. It's the first step in cleansing your spirit. It's the first step in renewal. But it doesn't just happen at one moment. It doesn't just happen at the moment of Kol Nidre. You see, it's a process of becoming. Yom Kippur, our whole day, is dedicated to a process of becoming. Becoming the person who writes and affirms that they want to be in the Sefer HaChaim, in the book of life. And it doesn't just happen because you decided to come here tonight, or you heard the prayer sung just now. The process doesn't happen because you have to make an effort to change your heart, to become a kinder, more forgiving, more honest, more open person than you've ever been before. And let's face it, that's not particularly easy. We wear many masks, and we have many defenses that guard our hearts. And those can get in the way of being the person that we really want to be, the person that is kinder, the person that's more forgiving of ourselves and others. Our wounds from days and years past, the scabs and the scars of life have taken their toll. They've certainly taken their toll on me. But tonight, this night of nights, Shabbat Shabbaton, the Sabbath of all Sabbaths in our tradition, is considered by the mystics a night of special secrets that allow us to remove the bandages that have held us together. And tonight, in the safety of this community, of this sacred space that we have made, we can take a vow to live differently. So tonight, I'm going to invite you to take a pledge, not on a knee. That was supposed to be funny. The pledge is this: let's start with kindness. Something that we all could use a lot more of these days. You see, kindness, also in Hebrew chesed, is coupled with love. Kindness demands love. Love of humanity, love of your fellow human being, love of your neighbor, and love of yourself. Tomorrow afternoon in our Torah portion, we will read this: Ahavta re'echa kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. Rabbi Karen Thomashow of Isaac Mayer Wise Temple in Cincinnati wrote these beautiful words about that. Yeah, Lisa, it's your temple. In biblical Hebrew, a re'ah, the word for neighbor, is apparently related to the word ro'eh, the word for shepherd. Perhaps it originally denoted a fellow shepherd whose flocks grazed near one's own. After all, we have many special laws in the Torah about returning the animals from our neighbor's fields. But the biblical neighbor couldn't be only someone who lives next door, because if we read later on in the book of Job, he has 3 neighbors, or re'eh, who are from faraway places. That is, they're not from his neighborhood. They listen to all the evil that befell him, which indicates to us that they were not actually neighbors as we think about it, but friends. So first, a neighbor is a person who lives next door. Then a neighbor is defined as a person with whom you have some type of personal relationship. But it is re'eh, or neighbor, that is also understood in Jewish tradition as your fellow human being. And this was as translated into the Aramaic translation of the Torah by the scholar Onkelos in the 2nd century. So chesed, loving kindness in Jewish tradition, is not only the generosity and kindness God shows to humanity, but it in turn, chesed, kindness, is what we are to show to our fellow human beings, our neighbors near and far. As Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors, teaches us, Al shlosha divarim ha'olam omed, al ha'torah va'al ha'avodah va'al gimilut chasadim. The world is sustained by 3 things: by Torah, by worship and prayer, and by gimilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness. It's not just something we do in response to one another. It is a core responsibility of being Jewish. It is a core operation of how the world is supposed to work. Why is it a pillar of sacred obligation, you ask? Because when we are unkind to one another, the human family is divided. Our rabbis, our midrash teaches us that God created humanity from one set of parents, Adam and Eve, so that we can all see that we are one human family. This loving kindness, chesed, is the way we treat one another, the way we're supposed to treat our family members. So you only had to look on the faces of those who marched in Charlottesville. The anger in Nazi and white supremacist faces contorted and chanting, "The Jews will not replace us," to know that they did not have love and kindness in their hearts. Nor did they see their neighbor as their concern. And for those of us like myself who grew up in the South, we know that there's a reason for that it's called being ugly. Because ugly actions of hatred and racism and suspicion contorts our faces and into our entire beings into something that is grotesque. And beauty comes from the heart of chesed, of loving kindness. That is what brings beauty into the world. Even Marilyn Monroe, that great Torah scholar, said, "A smile is the best makeup a girl can wear." And that other Torah scholar, Audrey Hepburn, "For beautiful eyes, look for the good in others. For beautiful lips, speak only words of kindness. And for poise, walk with the knowledge that you are never, ever alone." Tonight, on this holy night of healing and forgiveness and cleansing our souls, of seeking spiritual purity, let us focus on kindness and gentleness and love, on this attribute of chesed, this pillar of our world. So let me share with you one story of goodness and kindness to show us how we can walk with our neighbors, even those we don't yet know. 20 years ago, Kent drove a cab for a living, and here is how he tells this story. One night, I took a fare at 2:30 a.m. When I arrived to collect it, the building was dark except for a single light in a ground floor window. Under these circumstances, many drivers would simply honk the horn once. But I'd seen too many impoverished people, he wrote, who depended on taxis as their only means of transportation. Unless a situation smelled of danger, I always went to the door. This passenger might be someone who needs my assistance, I reasoned to myself. So I walked to the door and I knocked. Just a minute, answered a frail, elderly voice, and I could hear something dragging across the floor. After a long pause, the door opened, and a small woman in her 80s stood before me. She was wearing a print dress and a pillbox hat with a veil, like someone out of a 1940s movie. Besides her was a nylon suitcase. The apartment looked as if no one had lived in it for years. All the furniture was covered with sheets. There were no clocks on the wall, no tchotchkes, no utensils on the counters. In the corner was a cardboard box filled with photos and glassware. "Would you carry my bags out to the car?" she said. I took the suitcase to the cab and then returned to assist the old woman. She took my arm and we walked slowly to the taxi. She kept thanking me for my kindness. "It's nothing," I told her. "I just try to treat my passengers the way I would want my mother treated." "You're such a good man," she said. When we got in the cab, she gave me an address and then asked, "Could you drive me through downtown?" "It's not the shortest way," I answered. "Oh, I don't mind. I'm not in a hurry," she replied. "I'm on my way to the hospice." I looked in the rear view mirror. Her eyes were glistening. "I don't have any family left," she continued. "The doctor says I don't have very long." I quietly reached over and shut off the meter. "What route would you like me to take?" And so for the next 2 hours, we drove through the entire city. She showed me the buildings where she had once worked as an elevator operator. We drove through the neighborhood where she and her husband had lived when they were newlyweds. She pulled me up in front of a furniture store that had once been a ballroom where she had gone dancing as a young woman. Sometimes she asked me to slow down in front of a particular building or a corner and would sit staring into the darkness, saying nothing. As the first hint of the sun came up over the horizon, she suddenly said, "I'm tired. Let's go now." And so we drove in silence to the address that she had given me. It was a low building, like a small convalescent home, with a driveway that passed under a portico. 2 orderlies came out to the cab as soon as we pulled up. They were solicitous and intent and watching her every move. They must have been expecting her. I opened the trunk, took the small suitcase to the door. The woman was already seated in the wheelchair. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, reaching into her purse. "Nothing," I said. "But you have to make a living," she answered. "Oh, there are other passengers," I said. And almost without thinking, I bent over and I gave her a hug. And she held on to me tightly. Our hug ended with this remark: "You gave an old woman a little moment of joy today. Thank you." I squeezed her hand and then walked into the dim morning light. Behind me, I could hear her door shut. It was the sound of the closing of a life. I didn't pick up any more passengers that shift. I drove aimlessly, lost in thought, for the rest of the day. I could hardly talk. What if that woman had gotten an angry driver, or one who had been impatient to end his shift? What if I had refused to take that run, or had honked once and then driven away? On quick review, I don't think I could have done anything more important in my entire life. We're conditioned to think that our lives revolve around great, important moments. But great moments often catch us unaware, beautifully wrapped in what others may consider a small one. In recent days, we've heard stories coming from Texas, from Houston and Florida, the Caribbean and Mexico, of small moments of kindness and compassion, of neighbors reaching out to help one another in times of crisis. It is our human instinct. Up there is my friend, Rabbi Michael Fishbeck. He's the new rabbi in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. For many years, he served in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and only this July, he moved with his family to take up the post at one of the oldest synagogues in the Western Hemisphere. Maybe some of you have been in that shul. Because of Irma and then Hurricane Maria, the home he and his family were renting has no roof. The home he and his wife Julie were in escrow on was destroyed. The prayer books of the synagogue, waterlogged, gone. And they even had to reschedule Rosh Hashanah services because of the storms, the floods, the lack of power, and the curfews. Things there are simply awful, just like Puerto Rico. There's almost no electricity except for a few hours of generator power and weak cell service. No planes in or out as the airport is destroyed. Now the army has already arrived on St. Thomas, but the conditions on the islands are rough. Food is in short supply. A hot shower, you can forget about that. He told me that he had to pour bottled water one day over his head because he couldn't stand his own smell. But he drove all over the island to get enough bars on his phone to post a Facebook message and some of these pictures. And he sent me a private message. The one thing that has struck him is the resilience of the people there and the way they are sharing with each other. He mentioned even the kindness of random strangers that are helping one another. You see, the world needs more kindness. Not just in crisis situations like in Puerto Rico and St. Thomas and Houston and Mexico. Now more than ever, simple human kindness. We have to put away the anger and the rage, the suspicion and the fear that are swirling around us. Well, we still have to fight for justice. We must and we shall. But we have to do it differently. The anger, it is expressed everywhere, is eating us all alive. It's in every movie. It's in every video game that our kids play. Maybe some of you. It's certainly around us in the viciousness of the political world. It's in the workplace and on the roads we drive. And we have to overcome our fears because it's creating an environment that makes us all short-tempered and impatient. The hostility and animosities that we have lived with for years in our own country seems to have peaked in recent months, and it's destroying the ability to even talk civilly to one another. And our anger is fueled depending on which cable news we listen to. We have forgotten how to be kind, even amidst our righteous indignation. When we say we have to come from love and kindness, that is what we have to do. We have to combat this culture of cruelty with every ounce of our moral fiber, because the unkindness and the anger eats away at our humanity. When we forget to be kind, we snipe and we pick at each other, and we don't even realize perhaps that we're doing it. It's dehumanizing. It shows a basic lack of respect for one another. It shows that our own egos and those of the power-hungry politician and business people, those who are disempowered, those who feel disempowered, are damaged. And in turn, that damage wreaks havoc everywhere. Bitterness has stolen dreams and buried talents of so many of us who live with secret and not so secret pains. And it is this culture of cruelty and unkindness which divide us one from the other. Kol Nidre's haunting melody should stir in us our soul's memory. It should stir our humanity to be more than we have been. Before we were filled with impurities, but on this night, we pray to restore our humanity and help us to remember to be kind. As the words of the psalmist teach us, Ki amarti olam chesed yibaneh, shamayim tachin emunatcha bahem. For I said, forever will it be built with loving kindness. In heaven, which you will establish your faithfulness. The world is built on a platform of chesed, of kindness. And it is the very covenant of the Jewish people is built on that pillar. Even the Torah itself is built on chesed. As the Talmud teaches us, Rabbi Simle expounded, the Torah, its beginning is the performance of kindness and the end is the performance of kindness. Its beginning is the performance of kindness as it is written, and God made for Adam and his wife skin garments, and God clothed them. And its end is the performance of kindness as it is written, and God buried him, Moses, in the valley. You see, the entire Torah, from Genesis to Deuteronomy, begins and ends with stories of God's gentleness and God's kindness to us. Clothing Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, even after they have sinned. And in the final chapters of the Torah, God actually buries Moses at the end of his life on Mount Nebo. It's an important message and reminder to each of us on Yom Kippur. We merit God's kindness even if we have sinned. Even if we have done wrong. Even when we err. And we can be clothed in holy garments where kindness is the core. You see, in Jewish tradition, when we die, we're not buried in our clothes, we're buried in a kittel, a special white, almost bathrobe. That's why we wear white on Yom Kippur. The kittel you get married in, you wear it on the holidays, on Yom Kippur, on Shabbat, and then it becomes your shrouds. These special garments remind us of God's kindness that extends to us tonight and tomorrow on Yom Kippur and in truth throughout our whole lives. You see, chesed, loving kindness, is one of the names of God, actually. In the Kabbalistic tradition, you can find this aspect of God on the mystical tree of life. When we act with chesed, we are channeling the very aspect of the divine. And we bring God down from heaven according to the Kabbalists. So you see, chesed, loving kindness, isn't just for those who've done good as a reward. But loving kindness is extended to even those of us who have done wrong. And that is a radical idea. Spread kindness to those who don't deserve it. You see, that upends the usual idea of how the world works, right? You see, because it's an attitude of respect for another person's humanity, even when they don't recognize their own humanity. If God can extend that graciousness, that chesed, this love, this kindness to each of us in our imperfections, how much the more so must we learn to do the same, as difficult as it might be, to extend our kindnesses around to those who have done wrong or who have done us wrong. And that is really hard. When we act with this intention to be kind, we change the relationship we are in, not only in the physical world, but in the metaphysical world. And surprisingly, science has proven we actually change the structure of our bodies. In the field of psychoneuroendocrinology, Scientists study hormone fluctuations and their relationship to human behavior. It may be viewed from the perspective of psychiatry, where in certain mood disorders, there are associated neuroendocrine or hormonal changes that actually affect the brain. A recent study was done about the attribute of human kindness. The scientists studied what they called pro-social behavior, voluntary acts performed with the intention of benefiting others and the world rather than benefiting the self. This is how the authors of the study characterized being kind to others. And so over the course of 4 weeks, participants were randomly engaged to perform acts of kindness for strangers or the world, and the scientists measured the output of certain hormones and triggers in brain activity. I'm not going to bore you with all the details and the information about hormone levels and scientific measurements. I'm just going to cut to the chase. The study concluded that pro-social behaviors, the things that you and I would define as kindness towards others, actually impacts certain gene expressions profiles in a way that explained previously observed health advantages associated with strengthening social ties. In other words, being kind to others, engaging in chesed and kindness, it's good for your health and longevity, my friends. In other words, science is proving what we Jews have always known to be true for centuries. Acts of gimilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, treating our neighbors as we wish to be treated, brings us to a sense of well-being of mind and body and spirit. Chesed, loving kindness, not only changes the recipient, but changes the person who acts. And therefore, it changes the whole world. A true story from Arkansas. When the supermarket clerk tallied up my groceries, said Leslie, I was $12 over what I had on me. I began to remove items from the bag when another shopper handed me a $20 bill. Please don't put yourself out, I told him. Let me tell you a story, he said. My mother's in the hospital with cancer. I visit her every day and bring her flowers. I went this morning and she got mad at me for spending my money on more flowers. She demanded that I do something else with that money. So here, please accept this. It's my mother's flowers. You see, the kindness to strangers changed so many worlds that day. First, for Leslie from Arkansas, it changed her world by sparing her shame and embarrassment at not having the cash on hand. For whatever reasons, that act of generosity and kindness, it upheld her dignity. It changed the giver's world because he was truly helping another person and fulfilling his mother's request. He was honoring his mother. You remember part of the 10 Commandments, number 5? All who witnessed this exchange were also changed by the environment of kindness. And the man also became a deputy, a shaliach for kindness, for his ill mother, who by his act of generosity and kindness empowered her to not be a victim of her circumstance from her own sickbed. In one simple, generous act, kindness spread out. Even in the business world, believe it or not, kindness takes hold. In 2015, Google set out to assemble the perfect work team. Research revealed that group projects were producing the highest profitability, so that the company wanted to assemble the right combination of engineers to work together. They learned that work teams found more solutions, innovated better, and had greater job satisfaction. But Google, well, they wanted to know why some groups experience higher efficiency than others. After extensive research, the company reported its findings. They discovered that team culture was the major factor in determining a work group's productivity. And more than any other factor, psychological safety was critical to the team's success. The best teams, they valued each member's opinion. The best teams, no single person dominated the group discussions. And the team that had social sensitivity to others in the group and how they were feeling, they were the most productive. In other words, being kind to your coworker and your teammate makes you a better worker. In the end, Google has discovered the value of kindness in the workplace. And interestingly enough, researchers from the Harvard Business School, the Yale School of Management, the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School arrived at similar conclusions. Their study revealed that a kinder work environment tends to be more productive. The study said, when we take time to help out others, it increases our sense of efficiency and boosting our perception of the time we have available. Kindness to those you work with elevates the connection of human relationships. Respect, kindness, coupled with humility, create a balance in our lives and in the universe. Our great teacher Maimonides writes, "It is a positive commandment of rabbinic origin to visit the sick, comfort the mourner, to prepare for a funeral, prepare a bride, accompany guests, attend to all the needs of a burial, carry a corpse on one's shoulder, walk before the bier, mourn, dig a grave, and bury the dead, and also to bring joy to bride and groom and help them in all their needs. These are deeds of kindness," he wrote, "that one carries out with his person, that have no limit." They're based on a passage from the Mishnah, "Elu divarim she'en lahem shi'or." These are things that have no measure. And all of these mitzvot, he writes, their origin, what do they stem from? What verse in the Torah? Ahavta re'echa kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, kindness begets kindness. Kindness changes the community. It changes the people in the community for the better. It sets a new bar for all of us to live up to. We build on love. Our rabbis are trying to teach us that what gives us moral courage to stand up to cruelty in the world around us is that we build on kindness and love. You've seen this all in action. The resistance of Gandhi, the nonviolent civil disobedience of the African American civil rights movement, the teachings of Dr. King and of Nelson Mandela in South Africa. Chesed is this important value, helps us to bring justice from heaven. Robert F. Kennedy said this, "Each time a person stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he or she sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, crossing each other from a million different centers of energy. Those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. We know what nonviolent protest can do because it is based in a different set of values than angry confrontation based in fear and hatred. That is why screaming matches of protesters are futile. Instead of marching with a steadfast commitment to justice and kindness and love, that is what will change the calculus of the day," he wrote. You see, these are Jewish values, our sacred values, our values that hold up the world. Love, justice, tzedek, chesed, humility, they're all interconnected. As the prophet Micah has taught us, what does God require of you? Only to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly before your God. And so tonight, as we ask forgiveness from God and others and ourselves, let us recommit to these foundational ideals of our people. Tonight, I ask you to spread kindness, to live a life of chesed. For some of you, it's going to mean not being so snarky. For others of you, it's going to mean giving more tzedakah. For others, it will mean giving more of your time. It might mean learning the ways of nonviolent protest. Chesed may mean going to Guatemala with our temple in January to build a home for the villagers of Los Agua Caliente. It will mean going tomorrow and bringing new backpacks and school supplies for the children there when we take it in January. The choice to live an intentional life of chesed comes in many forms. It means respecting others no matter their station in life and walking in the footsteps of God. This year at Kol Nidre is now declared the year of chesed, of kindness. The year that we are going to commit to be kinder to one another, to show more kindness in our world. This year, let us act more charitably to one another, giving each other the benefit of the doubt rather than the cruelties of suspicion. This year, we're going to ask you to be more engaged than you've ever been before in our temple family, even as the world is clamoring for your time and your attention. Together, we need to show up more for one another. We need to do what God tells us to do. Visit the sick, accompany the mourners. We need you to come and be a part and share in the kindness that I know is inside you. We need to show up for one another because that is what a synagogue is all about. Not just taking, but giving of yourself. Help make the minyan. Help bring chesed down from heaven. Last year, I asked you on these holy days to commit to coming to just 2 more Kol Nidre programs and events than you ever did. So I want you to check in on that. This year, in our year of chesed, I'm asking you to show up even more. Once a month. Twice a month. Show up for each other. In the coming year of chesed, how will you incline your heart and your actions towards kindness? My prayer for us, for our temple, and for each of you, may we always walk in God's footsteps, and may the shofar accompany your safe passage, filled with chesed, filled with loving kindness throughout the entire year. Ken Yehi Ratzon, so may it be God's will.